Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring a curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I'll be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we take a look inside Duluth's mysterious Owls Club. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Joining me on this venture inside the over a century-old fraternal organization known simply as the Owls Club is arts and entertainment reporter Jay Gabler. Jay, welcome back.
Glad to be here, Wyatt. I'm sorry to report the water only flows in one direction from the Owls Club, so it's a little bit less interesting than last week's episode.
I'm surprised you have enough confidence to even make that claim. With the Duluth's hills and such, who knows where that... Well, I'll go to Lake Superior, let's be honest here.
I mean... A drink poured at the Owls Club could go in any number of directions, but probably a drop of water falling upon the Owls Club will most likely roll down eventually into the lake.
And so, Jay, what kind of prompted you, or how did you come about pursuing this story for Northland? I know this is actually one you've been actually working on for quite a bit of time now. I know there was a lapse in communication there for a bit that kind of lent to the mysteriousness of, at least from our perspective, of what the Owls Club is. Maybe they're trying to hide something. Nothing so glamorous. It was just communication. But I know you've been working on it for quite a bit now, or trying to.
I first became aware of the Owls Club through Homegrown. After I started this job in 2022, I did a feature about all the different Duluth homegrown venues. So that was a kind of whirlwind introduction to dozens of places across town, the towns, if you include Soup Town, where the Homegrown Music Festival takes place. And I heard about the Owls Club, this former mortuary with this really unique vibe and a cool opportunity for people since it's a private club. It's not normally open to the public, so during Homegrown, you can go see a show there, get in the door, and so that piqued my curiosity. Then I learned about the liquor license, which is unusual, maybe not as unique as we thought when I first started reporting this story, but learned about that, and so started reaching out to club leadership. And it did take a minute. Initially, I thought maybe that was because there was something about the Owls Club that the Owls wanted to keep secret, that they didn't want newspaper coverage, they didn't want a podcast, they didn't want a video out there on Instagram for people to know all about the super secret, super exclusive Owls Club. And it turns out it was more mundane. It was more a matter of people getting around to it and getting the right people in the right place at the right time. But finally, we made that happen. And you and photographer Clint Austin and I spent a memorable afternoon at the Owls Club.
Yeah, for what we thought was going to be, a super mysterious, well, it is mysterious, but like secretive club. It was actually pretty welcoming and opening to us. Like, I don't know, I didn't feel restricted in our happenings there. And I felt very welcome when the three of us spent our couple hours there. So now let's talk about what is the Owls Club exactly. Not what we perceived it to be, but what it actually is.
So the Owls Club is technically a private fraternal organization in Duluth, Minnesota. It is at 118 East 2nd Street, basically just uphill from the main drag of Superior Street through downtown. So right there in the middle of Duluth, but maybe a little bit off the beaten path. Your average tourist may not have drove by the Owls Club or walked by. If they did, might not have noticed it, but a lot of Duluthians will recognize the club with its owls sign out front with the word Owls Club. So people might see that and wonder what it is. It is not an elaborate building. It's not a small building, but it's just sort of a classic old Duluth building perched on a hill. It's, unassuming. And so people might wonder what goes on under the sign of the owl. So it is a private club. And basically there's a membership. There are a couple hundred members. People can join up. It's a reasonable cost, $50 a year once you get in. And you can pop in and chill with your fellow owls. And, even though it is unassuming, there is a exclusivity to it. There is, membership does have its privileges, and they know who members are and who members are not. Here is Tyler Scouten.
Emphasis on who.
Emphasis on who.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no.
All I could think of was you were saying it.
Fair enough. Here is Club President Tyler Scouten on the first time that he visited the Owls Club.
Yeah, the first time I came here, I walked in the door, and it was like a record scratch. Everyone stopped and looked. And I felt weird, And it turns out it's because everybody knows everybody here. So when you hear the door beep, you're going to go say hi to whoever's coming in. But since I didn't know anybody, it was a very awkward situation. You get to know people very, very fast. And afterwards, I look back and realize I shouldn't have felt awkward. They were just looking to say hello to their friend. And now I'm one of them saying hello to the person who comes in the door.
All right, so now that we're actually inside the building, what actually goes on inside? Besides, obviously, you would imagine there'd be some owls in there in terms of design, and there's plenty of them.
There are many owls. It's a social club. So you walk in, the first floor is a bar area, kind of very old school, kind of has the feeling of your grandparents' basement, but not in sort of a precious way where people are trying to emulate that vibe. It actually kind of is your grandparents' basement. Your grandparents may well have been members if you're a Duluthian. When I searched our archives for mentions of the Owls Club, which is a fascinating journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, there were a lot of mentions in obituaries. People have gone to their graves as members of the Owls Club and been proud to, have it featured in their obituaries, no doubt, or at least their families have thought that was an important thing to mention. But yeah, basically people hang out. They, drink, they play games, they chat. There's a really nice deck that you can go out on that looks out on Lake Superior. Has a little bit more of a view since the old cozy bar was torn down, as one of the members pointed out to us. And then there's a space upstairs. You could use it for events, for rehearsals. That's where the homegrown venue is. If you're going to go see Duluth homegrown music there, artists play upstairs, and the downstairs bar remains private for members. So yeah, it's basically just a sort of loose, cozy, kind of, I dare I say, slightly ramshackle. I don't think Tyler would fault me for using that term. Building that, it's just a cozy spot for the members to hang out. And it used to be a mortuary. Here's Tyler on why he's been a member and is now the president of the club.
I love Duluth history. I think it's always been a big part of that, but kind of in the shadows, kind of this mysterious building with the owl sign out front that people didn't know about. But once you got into it and got to know, it's just local people getting together and meeting, but also it embodies that element of fraternal brothership or fellowship. And that is something I think it's fairly important to keep around.
And speaking of history and interest in Duluth history, we're not talking about the actual history of the Owls Club, because as mentioned in the intro, we're talking about a club that's over a century old.
Yeah, it goes way back. And what I learned digging into our archives, which go all the way back to the 19th century, is Duluth Owls clubs go back that far. There, as many people are aware, there have been in American history and in local history any number of fraternal clubs named after animals. Duluth has had a fair handful of those. But the idea of having an owls club goes way back. People around here seem especially enamored of the owls, which I suppose is appropriate. That's a lot of birders when they come to town. They're trying to spot a good owl or two. And so Duluthians maybe have always prided themselves and identified with owls. The first owl club actually found in Duluth dates back to the 1880s, but by 1890, as the News Tribune reported at the time, I think there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here, but also it was the truth. The newspaper reported that organization came to its death last year through the medium of strong drink. So the first Owl Club kind of burned itself out, but then shortly thereafter, another Owl Club, a similarly named organization, this one for young men, was founded. And its base was an Owl's Roost, a social spot, hangout on Minnesota Point, out on Park Point there. And that club remained active until at least the 1930s. So for a while, Duluth had multiple Owls Clubs. The current Owls Club started in the first decade of the 20th century. I heard 1909 from a current club member, but then looking at our archives, the Owls Club celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2004, so maybe something started back in 1904, but somewhere between 1900 and 1910, the current Owls Club was founded. It is nest number 1200 of the National Order of Owls, but they did go independent after a few decades, so they're no longer affiliated with any larger order of owls. It's just an independent club, but initially it was, I don't know if there were actually 1,199 or more other nests, but we were nest number 1,200. Maybe they went by hundreds, and there were just 11 others. Who knows? Anyway, that's what it was. And it was initially based in a since demolished building really close to where the News Tribune used to be on the 400 block of West Superior Street. That building is now long gone, not the News Tribune building. That's still there, but the old building that housed the Owls Club and based on the size of it from historic photographs, many other things. That building is long gone. And in 1924, the Owls Club purchased what was formerly the Grady and Horgan Mortuary and moved into that current building. So it's it's what the building used to be. It was a place where you went to mourn the dead or to be embalmed, I suppose, if you were the departed. And it got a little bit more social starting in 1924. Diving into the archives, I found all sorts of interesting incidents that happened over the years. As you would expect, just life being what it is, the club has been robbed multiple times. One colorful incident happened in 1934 during the Great Depression when 6 armed bandits broke in, bound to club caretakers, stole some money, some liquor, some cigarettes, and the caretakers finally wiggled loose at 4:30 a.m. I don't know what time the robbery happened, but that was quite a struggle for them to get themselves free. Called the police, and coincidentally, 32 years after that, so in the 1960s, that exact same amount of money, $250, worth a lot less by the 60s, was stolen by a group of burglars who came in and they had to contend with a security system that tear gassed them. So they broke into the safe, despite the fact that the safe was basically set up to hit you with tear gas if you tried to break in. And they toughed it through and they made it with that $250, which, not to say crime pays, but in a sense, they did kind of earn that. One thing that a lot of people are aware of about the history of the Owls Club, and something that only ended a couple years ago, is that the club was for a long time segregated by gender, that there were men and women who were members, but there were sort of subgroups within the Owls Club. And so there were different ways of being sorted into different sort of subclubs underneath the Owls umbrella. Here's Tyler's explanation.
There was 3 separate groups that met here. It was the Owls Club proper. There was the auxiliary, which is the wives, daughters, and widows of Owls Club members. They were there basically, their mission was to support the Owls Club. And then there was the Owlettes, which actually predates the auxiliary. It was a very small group of a lot of older members because that branched off probably in the 70s, I believe it was. So now we actually, after a number of meetings and everyone agreed, we actually merged we're all just one club now.
So this isn't even Duluth's first Owls Club, or even its second. So what's the deal with the Owls?
Good question. I asked Tyler, and here's his take on it.
I do love the owl. They're interesting animals in general. The Duluth Owls Club, as far as I understand, the Order of the Owls came from like boxcar workers, I believe it was. Something similar to that, where they were night owls, and then that's where they picked that one up. Wikipedia has a whole list of a lot of different animal clubs, and it's fun to go through. There's like naked mole rat clubs, and I mean, none of them exist. I would say most of them don't exist anymore, but there's so many different wild animals. The snake club, and we all know commonly the eagles, moose, elks, but looking and seeing how many other ones were out there is really interesting.
I did learn, interestingly, when searching the history of the club, that for a very brief time, and I mean, it sounds like less than a day, in 1943, the club had its own live owl. What happened is that a father-son duo were hunting on the North Shore, and they found an owl with an injured wing, and it must have just seemed natural to them. What do you do with an injured owl? You bring it to
the Owls Club.
So they did. And so that was the Owls Club, actual owl, which must have seemed really cool until people realized, well, the owl's going to need to eat. So according to News Tribune reporting, they brought the owl to a neighborhood grocery store where the owl really enjoyed a meal of raw liver, and then eventually made its way to what we now call the Lake Superior Zoo. I suppose at the time would have been called the Duluth Zoo. Do
we know the name of the owl?
The name of the owl was not preserved, if it was even given an owl.
They didn't realize that there's going to be a podcast and an article about it decades upon decades later.
I'll have to ask Tyler or other members what an appropriate name for the official Owls Club mascot would be. You know, the Owls Club has been known to participate in the Christmas City of the North parade, so they could get an owl mascot, put someone in a mascot suit, and, well, that mascot would then naturally need a name.
I'm sure to be voted on by the active members of the Owls Club.
Yes. That the Owls Club is a functioning democracy, thankfully.
So let's now take it back to the original reason you wanted to pursue this article, as you mentioned earlier, the distinctive liquor license. While be it you did mention that it's maybe not as unique as you initially had thought, it still is distinctive enough to worth talking about.
Yeah, so the Owls Club was making, occasional headlines, say 15 years ago for having a rare bottle club license. So this is a license where it's for private clubs and members can bring in their own bottle of liquor and store it at the club to be served to them and consumed on the premises. The current license is what I actually wrote to the city of Duluth about this to confirm this, and they say there is a club license, and it's not unique. The Kitchigami Club also has the same license, according to the city of Duluth, and the Kitchigami Club, another private club with a very different, also illustrious history. Members there can bring in bottles of wine to be stored in wine lockers. I've learned at the Owls Club, you still bring in your bottle of liquor, whether it's top shelf, middle shelf, bottom shelf. It's a good mix, and it's stored behind the bar, and the bartender will, serve your booze to you, and, will provide whatever you need with it. Generally, a cup would be nice, sometimes ice, and so you pay a couple of bucks for that. But the bartenders are actually all volunteer. They're members. So it just adds to that spirit of community that they do have some beer and some house bottles available. So if there's an event, for example, where non-members are present, or if members just wanted to try something a little bit different than whatever is in the bottle that they have stored, those options are there. And I understand that's part of the newer license that the club has. Here's Artie Staubs, a member we spoke with, talking about the volunteer bartender culture at the Owls Club.
Our bar manager will train them in that they have this cash register up there. I'm used to the old one that used to press, and the thing came up, and I look at that thing. It's like looking at my computer at home. But the younger people love it, and so they're happy, and they're happy to volunteer. We think it's absolutely great, and we encourage our members to tip our people well because they're not being paid. That's the only thing that they would receive are tips.
An interesting piece of history I learned about the Owls Club's liquor license is that bottle club liquor license, that distinctive license that the club had for some decades, is not ye old. That it was not the original liquor license the club had for decades. Through the middle of the 20th century, the club had a standard on-sale liquor license like any other bar or venue in Duluth. But then the early 1970s hit, and the city of Duluth's population began to decline for all the reasons that have been much discussed: economic downturn, industrial change, reduction of mining and shipping activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The city's population starts to decline. And I didn't even know. So what do I know about liquor licenses? Little. I learned that, at least at the time, the number of liquor licenses you could have in a city were conditional on your population. So if your population goes down, you actually have to get rid of some of your liquor licenses. So this puts Duluth in an awkward situation already. It's kind of like adding insult to injury, right? They're already losing population, and now they have to go to some of their local establishments and say, well, I know this might not seem like it's going to help us get population back, but we have to yank your liquor license. And so this was a hard thing for the city of Duluth for years to grapple with. And the News Tribune reported on at the time. They actually went to the state legislature and got special carve-outs for the decks, Spirit Mountain, and the airport so they could have liquor licenses irrespective of the city's number of allotted liquor licenses. But one compromise they came up with for the Owls Club and a few other places that have since closed was to issue this bottle club license, where it's not a proper liquor license in the sense that anyone can just sort of walk in and order a drink, but it was a way that the club was able to continue having its members enjoy an adult beverage without having one of those standard liquor licenses that became so limited in the city. And so
what's keeping the club relevant for newer members? Because I know we talked to Arden, who's been there for a long time, but now they're seeing, as your article talked more about as well, more of a boom in younger members coming into the fold.
Yeah, so you've got the longtime members, and then you have newer members who have been discovering the club in recent years. And this is when I say recent, from what I hear, this is really a sort of post-COVID phenomenon, that a new wave of members are discovering the club in just the last few years. We talked to one of these newer members, Kaylee Matuzak, who is a local musician. She's played the club through Homegrown, and a proud member who has, well, I'll let Kaylee tell you.
I was kind of the beginning of like the newer younger wave of people, because I started coming here. My partner became a member, Steve Sokola, like bandmate, other friends became members, and then it kind of grew to a whole bunch of like other homegrown steering committee people became members. So I have a picture. It's me and I think like 8 of my friends that I all got to join. Like, so I'm like, I'm your grandmother or whatever. But no, it's really nice because like even the older folks who have been members forever, when we have shows here, like they're really into it, and like just the energy is always great. It's such a mix of people.
For listeners who have listened to previous episodes, Kaylee's a voice we've heard on this podcast before, and I don't know if it should be surprising or unsurprising that Steve Sokola is now also a part of this fold of owls.
There's a reason they call her Duluth's famous Kaylee, and they don't call him Duluth's famous Steve, but he's probably Duluth's most famous Steve, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say so. That guy's everywhere. Literally everywhere. And so now let's get into, I know we've kind of demystified the Owls Club a little bit, at least demystified it more than what our initial expectation was going in. That's not to say that it doesn't have some secrets to it. Do they have any secret rituals that we can discuss here?
They certainly do have secret rituals that are members only, and we, for obvious reasons, did not learn about some important secret rituals known only to members. But as we were wrapping up, shout out to photographer Clint Austin, who has been around Duluth for a while and knows a thing or two. And so he asked Artie Stobbs if he could participate in a Owls Club tradition. And here's what we heard.
Can you give us a 3-hoot salute?
Ooh, that's secret.
Come on, do it.
That's
Come on.
all right. 1, 2, 3. Hoot, hoot, hoot.
So you hear Artie's table mates sort of egging him on there and encouraging him. So I feel like it's not too much of a violation for us to put that on the podcast. It sounds like there was, the club is okay with that little piece of their lore being out there. What other little pieces there are? Well, if you want to find out, you have to become a member. If you want to learn more about what other secret rituals there may be, you'll just have to become a member.
Which then begs the question, how does one become a member? How exclusive are we talking here? It is exclusive, but not maybe as exclusive as one might think.
There is a process. I understand that you need 2 current members to vouch for you, which means you need to meet 2 current members or know 2 current members and have them have a high enough opinion of you that they will say, yes, I endorse this person. I was raised Catholic, so I went through confirmation. I imagine it being a little bit like that, where your godparents stand beside you and sort of put their, hands on your shoulder and say, okay, you can welcome this teen into the fold. I that's kind of how I'm imagining the Owls process being: 2 members standing behind you with their hands on your shoulders being, yes, he's good, if that is your gender or whatever. I
can't imagine it's nearly as lengthy of a process as a confirmation, though. I'm sure you don't have to take classes for it, but that is an interesting visual to imagine in terms of the support behind you.
I mean, I was a little lazy about my confirmation, if I'm going to be telling on myself here. So I can't say for sure that it is a less of a process to get into the Owls Club than it was for me to get into the Catholic faith as an adult. But it takes a couple of months is kind of what I gather. You have the members to vouch for you, and then there's a vote. And if you get voted in, your dues are $55 for the first year and then $50 annually. And there are some other expectations, it sounds like, that go with that. Since we reported this article, actually, I've spoken with a past member who has no ill will, really had a great experience with the club. But she said, I had a lot going on in my life when I was a member. I missed a bunch of meetings and got kicked out. And she said, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. I, nothing against anyone there. I was not as active as I needed to be. So there may be some expectations of involvement in voting or whatever. But again, you have to become a member or inquire to find out. And people who are curious to find out more can either go to their homegrown shows. You can find out more information about those at the Duluth Homegrown Music Festival website. Or you can go to one of a couple open houses that are coming up. May 17th and 27th, Owls Club is having open houses for people to learn a little bit more about what goes on there.
Well, as far as we know, there is one exception that Tyler told us about of a member an honorary member that maybe isn't an active participant in the club.
Yeah, apparently Crispin Glover, the actor, filmmaker, eccentric, personage was in Duluth at one point for a film screening and kind of had a little odyssey across town. Crispin Glover is known for, marching to the beat of his own drummer, or, however he moves himself from one place to the other, whether it's walking, crawling, biking, who knows, but does it to the beat of his own drummer, and somehow ended up partying at the Owls Club. And so, yes, apparently Crispin Glover is the sole honorary member of the Owls Club that we know of. Maybe there are others.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I feel like Timothy Chalamet missed his chance when he was in Duluth. It's not far from Bob Dylan's birthplace and such.
So missed his chance. But, when he was in town, there might not have been an open house. It wasn't during Homegrown. I've learned that he hung out at the Rathskeller, which was convenient to the Airbnb where he was staying. But yeah, that would have been an opportunity. But, has he missed it? Or does he just need to come back? We know he's been to Duluth twice. Why not make an even 3? I presume with success of A Complete Unknown, they'll make a sequel, right?
I don't know. Have there been any sequels to these biopic movies before? I don't think so.
No, not yet. But
There's
no
always
one's
a
like
first.
Bob Dylan. And, Bob Dylan is kind of like Bowie. He's gone through a lot of phases, right? So we've got one phase of Bob. I think we now need to have the Woodstock phase of Bob, where he kind of goes out in the country and collaborates with the band, et cetera, et cetera. And, I think with each of these, hopefully, series of biopics that they will hopefully make moving forward, Timothy will have to come back and touch base again with Bob Dylan's Northland roots. So, yeah, I can't say that, he can just walk into the Owls Club at any time, but, maybe if he knocked and asked nicely, they might be inclined to make an exception for him. As you say, Wyatt, they're not too scary.
Yeah. And follow-up question to that then, Jay, is do you see yourself ever becoming an Owl member?
I certainly could see myself becoming an Owls Club member. $50 a year. What?
It's cheaper than Netflix. That's what they said.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's what Tyler said. Cheaper than Netflix. And I feel like it would be a great thing to have for when those friends come to visit who are the Duluth obsessives, the people who have done it all in Duluth, who've been on both the North Shore Scenic Railroad and the River Train, who, check out all the new restaurants, who have, checked off all the Duluth boxes. They probably still have never been to the Owls Club. So to be able to welcome them as your guest into the Owls Club, I feel like that would be a real Duluth insider move to be able to pull. But having learned that there are a certain number of meetings that one might normally be expected to attend, that is an obligation. I don't want to get in the situation where I have to be kicked out. It sounds like that's not the worst experience, but that would be, if I can avoid that, I will. I will wait to join the Owls Club until I'm sure that I have the leisure time to fully participate in this sacred, non-religious order.
Well, if that were ever to happen to you, Jay, I'm sure you could write a well-written column about the time you get kicked out of the Owls Club. I thought it'd make for an entertaining read, I'd say.
Sure.
It's not a challenge.
I wrote about getting
challenge.
I wrote about getting blacklisted from the Chanhassen, so why not write about getting kicked out of the Owls Club?
All right, Jay. Well, before we wrap it up, I always got to ask some phrase of this question, but why do you think that this fits into Northlandia? To me, it seems self-explanatory in terms of there's certainly a unique element to all of this and kind of a fun weirdness to the conversation of owls and this club, essentially.
Yeah, and knowing that owls are such a big part of the birding culture up here, that's such a distinctive part of the local fauna, it makes a lot of sense that we would have an owls club, that we should have an owls club, and to know that they once had a real owl makes that all the better. But I think, to me, where it makes this fit into Northlandia is the link to the Northland's mania, if that's not too strong a word, for preservation. That once something exists up here, people really hate to have it not exist, which is a beautiful thing about this area of the world, that traditions really, really, really die hard around here. And, when you talk to people about the Owls Club, I have not heard people claiming that the Owls Club needs to be preserved because it is an especially unique, special, priceless, precious type of place. The building is kind of neat, has a cool vibe to it, but nobody is making a case yet, as far as I know, for it to be included in the National Register of Historic Places. The culture at the Owls Club is fun, but so is it at any number of other Duluth venues where, you might feel like everybody knows your name if you go there often enough. But it sounds like people just think, gosh, the Owls Club is just kind of a nice thing that we have here in Duluth. That's a nice thing for 200 people to have, to be able to go hang out together. And it's been around now for over 115 years. So shouldn't we just keep it around? Wouldn't it be a shame if this died? So let's do whatever we need to keep the Owls Club going.
All right, Jay. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks again so much for joining.
Hoot hoot.
Hoot hoot to you.
It's only 2 hoots because I'm not a member.
Yes, correct. We are not claiming to be members.
No.
But just hoot hoot.
Hoot hoot.
And thank you for joining us in this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, see photos by Clint Austin, and watch video produced by myself, visit DuluthNewsTribune.com/topics/Northlandia. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber of Duluth News Tribune at DuluthNewsTribune.com/subscribe. Join us again next time and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss found in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.